I'm fighting off a bit of a travel cold, so I apologize if I sneeze while doing this review. One of these films I saw when I was in Chicago a few days ago. One of them I saw tonight because it's about to leave the theater here in Atlanta. They're both documentaries. One I recommend, one I do not. The one I do not recommend is the one I saw in Chicago. This is Three Identical Strangers. It's directed by Tim Wardle. It's very buzzy. It made a ton of money. Um, it's probably going to nominate for an Oscar. It's not a very well made documentary. It's a very interesting story that tracks the three brothers who were part of the nature versus nurture twin study. It's a controversial study that has a lot to say about ethics and psychology. The film follows these three brothers. What were their names? Oh God, David, Bobby, and Eddie. They all had different last names, obviously, because they were all adopted at various ages. Or they were all adopted when they were kids, and then later, two of them found each other, and then the third one found the two of them, and the next thing you know, it's a big media storm. Thing made almost $5 million in the box office because the story is so interesting, but it's not well done. It is very leading. It's like leading the witness kind of the whole time. It overly sensationalizes a lot of things that should have been done in a much more deft way. It inadvertently um, um, sort of implies an international Jewish conspiracy that uses ways of talking that are very creepy and strange coming from the three boys who were Jewish. And there's just some weird ways that things are handled that I didn't find were done well. It also sort of really majorly glosses over mental illness. It armchair diagnoses a lot of things. It shows one point of view without ever showing a counter point of view for a bunch of the things. It's very anti-science in a really kind of disturbing way, where all the scientists come across as maniacal, like people. It's very strange. Apparently, two of the other twins that were in this study wrote a book called Identical Strangers, and that book was made into a documentary by a woman called The Twinning Reaction, who they were all developing these at the same time, and she said she didn't want to make her film with them. And I'm wondering if it's because she was actually making a better film. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but it just felt like this was such a good story told so poorly, um, and very much has an idea of what it thinks happened and doesn't allow for any exploration or nuance into the varying facets of human nature. So that's what I feel about this film. There you go. My cough. The next one I watched was called The King, and it's one of those documentaries that I feel truly deserves the term nonfiction narrative because it's not really a documentary in the traditional sense, but it is because it's nonfiction and it's got a thesis and it's just a fascinating film by Eugene Jarecki. He traces the rise and fall of Elvis Presley while also tracing the rise and fall of American culture. Um, Really fascinating. There's one quote, I can't remember who it was from one of the people in it, that talks about how when his grandfather was born, it was all about American democracy, and democracy was what was American. And by the time his grandfather died, it was all about entertainment and capitalism, and that was fascinating. Um, it had a lot of interesting talking heads. There was Alec Baldwin, there was Chuck D, there was Van Jones, there was Ethan Hawke, and then there was just random regular people and bluegrass musicians and all kinds of things. This film premiered, I believe, at Sundance under the title Promised Land before it was changed, not Sundance, Cannes, before it was changed to The King. And it intersplices, they're driving this, what's it called? Rolls Royce across America, looking at all the places that were big for Elvis's life, like Tupelo and Memphis and Nashville and New York and Hollywood and Vegas, while also talking to regular people and actors and musicians and everyone sort of giving a point of how they felt about Elvis and what Elvis meant for them and what Elvis meant for society. And it's not always positive, which is great. It's a very rounded mixture of people discussing his iconography and his impact on culture, and it doesn't gloss over, talking about a cultural appropriation, and it doesn't gloss over. It doesn't take sides either. It just sort of shows different opinions on Elvis as a metaphor for America. And in the film, will have you feel as though Fat Elvis dying at 42 is where we're at in America. That's sort of its thesis. Um, take that as you will. It does a really good job of showing how Elvis was this great, amazing artist to the very end, and juxtapose, but not in the best way that he was. He was overweight and he was sort of sad, but he could still sing the heck out of Unchained Melody. And they showed this footage um, mixed in with footage of the 2016 elections. It's horrifying and amazing. They interviewed people who knew Elvis. They interviewed his best friend. They interviewed guitar player. They interviewed his hairstylist. They interviewed the woman who was his housekeeper at Graceland the day he died. It was just a really broad spectrum of interviews and footage, and just it had like 4 editors working on it because there was just a million sequences of footage to make you sort of feel a certain way about America at the certain points that it was showing you. I really enjoyed it. It didn't make Elvis greater than he is, and but it also didn't, like, it was a nice mixture of showing, like, that he was the king and that he wasn't the king at the same time. Another random talking heads, Ashton Kutcher and Mike Myers, but they were really great. Mike Myers came from this Canadian point of view and had some really interesting things to say as a Canadian. And Ashton Kutcher had this one moment where he's talking about fame, and he flat out says that he is more famous than his talent warrants. And you're like, I thought that was a very good moment from him. Just a really interesting film. There's beautiful music from a lot of contemporary bluegrass artists like Ward, but also try to find the link. Oh God, there was God, it was like Jenny something or other. Where did it go? Oh, here we go. I want this soundtrack actually. The soundtrack was amazing. Oh, Emmy Sunshine in the Rain. Never heard of her. She's like an 8-year-old who can sing better than anybody ever. It was amazing. And then they had a handful of other musicians, some covering Elvis songs, some singing just bluegrass sort of things. Ethan Hawke had a lot of interesting things to say, and he was an EP on this, and I want to know, like, is he a big Elvis fan or what? Because that makes me love Ethan Hawke more than I already love Ethan Hawke. So, I think if you're a fan of Elvis, you'll enjoy this film, and if you're a fan of comparative sociopolitics, you will also enjoy this film, um, because it's just an interesting look at America over the last 60 years. Um, and I just, as I was watching it, I don't even know, like, how to feel. It was one of those documentaries where I was just like, I'm watching something, and it's gonna have to sit with me for a while, I think. But I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the way it played with form, and there's just a lot of thoughts rolling around in my head based on some of these points some of the people made. Um, so it is an interesting, like, I've seen a couple of like documentaries in the wake of the 2016 election that were clearly being made prior to, but then finished during. So like this one, Transamerica. I feel like there was another one I saw. They all sort of incorporate um, where we're headed by incorporating where we were, and it's terrifying and amazing. So I recommend this one. It's called The King. It's playing in limited. It is also in Chicago, so if you're in Chicago, you can go see it there at the Music Box. That's where I saw Three Identical Strangers, which I did not like. Now I'm gonna go drink some tea and try to get over this cold. I recommend The King. I do not recommend Three Identical Strangers. Have a good night.